Good morning, everyone. We're back for the Bucky call. It is the 16th of October, 2024. We're all scrambled up in our time zones. Steve isn't with us. He's in no time at all. He's in his Vipassana meditation for 10 days and a vow of silence, and it's really pretty intense thing. So we're mindful of him in Lava Hot Springs, Idaho. We have Richard in Calgary, Canada, and we have Anne in Malaysia. Kuala Lumpur, is that right, Anne?
Yes, Kuala Lumpur. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, and normally Manu would be down under in South Africa, but he is in Los Angeles. So we've got very unusually three of us in the same time zone. I'm visiting in Vegas, Susan's in Arizona, and he's in California. We're all Pacific time. So how's that for lining the stars? Anyway, we're ready to go again for another Bucky call this morning. Joe is, of course, in New York time zone, Eastern time zone in Philly. So so we will get started. And Richard, how are you feeling? What's your intention for the call this morning?
So I'm feeling pretty good, and my intention for the call this morning, having just heard what you said, is, and all that we've talked about in relation to Fuller and his understanding of the universe, is that you will, and language that we've talked about, that the language of down under will disappear, along with the language of up and down and so forth and so on. So I expect to get more of that.
So early this morning.
I expect to get more of that kind of discussion and opportunity to learn more about the literature that we're reviewing. So yeah, I feel pretty good and look forward to this morning. And I'll be switching my from my phone over to my computer as soon as the computer decides it wants to wake up.
Richard, did you trim your beard differently?
No, only what the barber does when he says the same.
Oh, it looks nice. You look very scholarly.
Yeah, well, that's what's in behind the beard, not the beard itself.
Well, you know, Walter Russell and the gang with their Van Dykes.
Yeah. Okay. So Anne, how are you feeling? What's your expectations for today?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Yes, last week I was away in Tokyo, so apologies on that one, couldn't join in. It was a full-on event on that day itself. So yeah, I'm looking forward to joining back and catching up on where you're at. Yeah, it is a bit of a struggle for me trying to connect this more into what the world is. So, but yeah, I'm going for it. So, Susan, how do you feel, and what do you expect to take away today?
I feel happy to see my friends and happy to know that there is a time to study perspective and to keep expanding. I just had house guests for about 4 days, people that I went to Egypt with Marshall. And so it was nice to have it. You notice when there's folks around that you can use language differently, and that you get the opportunity to insist on, well, how do you define that? And do you really want to use that word? Because words have power, and these people actually value some of the things that we have come to appreciate from Bucky over the years of study. So it was, it's nice. They come up every few months. They live in San Felipe, Mexico now. They rent down there, and then I'm their US address. My Manu, how are you feeling? And what do you want to get out of today?
I feel good. Really, I can feel some waves around, you know. It's nice to be on this side of the world and be commuting. I guess we're beating the speed of light now into being in tune. But I'm happy, and what I expect is just to be participating to the fullest I can and exchanging, expanding and expanding, as Steve would say. That's my most expectation, understanding better. Joe, how do you feel? What do you expect?
You're muted, Joe.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was muted there for a minute. Feeling great. Just coming after, especially having met Manu in person. Kind of it was a reminder of like kind of this how special the call is. Because that moment where we do meet in person, it's we're building a relationship here, we're learning from each other all the time. But when we meet in person, it is a special moment, and I'm looking forward to that moment with everybody else here at some point. So as far as the call this morning, it's to continue our journey through cosmometry. I think it's actually been very helpful for me personally. It's one of those books again that you have to go through a couple of different times. But I think pretty soon there's the part of the book we're going to be coming up on that has to do with superclusters, and that's relevant to computing today, and where we are technologically, and how we're able to manipulate information. So I think that that is something that is going to be a particular interest to me, and I'm looking forward to, if we get there today. Wayne, I'm sorry. How do you feel, and what are you taking away from today?
Thank you. I've been thinking what Richard said about being down under and Manu referencing this part of the world. I was thinking about Bucky Fuller, how he anticipated that air travel would drastically change our relationships. And then he also foresaw the internet that he couldn't really articulate as the internet, but he did see a linkage of computers that would change the way people shared information and decentralize the flow of information. I think we're living a little bit of a miracle here this morning on this call, that for all of those years, 15 years or so, Susan and I have been associated with Manu on screen. And we feel like we know him. He lives very, very far away, as we humans think of it, down under on the bottom side of the planet. We're up here, toward the top side, and around the other side of it, about as far away as you can get from each other. And then all of a sudden, within a matter of hours, he's in Joe's hometown. And they're out on the streets of New York together, enjoying food and company and getting to know each other in person. What were the chances 50 years ago even of that meeting ever taking place? It would have been a major journey on a steamship or something. And it's just remarkable that we can do these things nowadays and have these associations, let alone intermingle intellectually and share our different thoughts and ideas and experiences and viewpoints. Because I've learned a lot from all of you, and Manu and Kelly in particular, and Anne, because they live in so far away in different cultures, and they have so much to share. So that's fun for me to be here this morning. I'm feeling relaxed, which I haven't for a little while. I've been on the road now for 5 days or so, and stayed in 3 different places, 2 friends' homes, and now finally at Lincoln's house in Vegas. And just this richness of relationships of people that I stayed for a couple of days with a friend of mine in St. George, Utah, which is about 115 miles north of Vegas.
Oh, there's a kettle.
With a friend who I met when we were 4 years old. And his family bought the farm next to our farm, 40 acres there, and they moved on to it. And our mothers got on the phones together. And how many children do you have? And boys or girls? And how old are the boys and girls? And we happen to be the same age. Oh, we should have these boys get together. So on some particular day, our mothers said, all right, you have your son run toward our house out in that plowed field, and I'll have my son run up toward your house, kitty corner, across the field, and they can meet each other. Now, if you know what a plowed field is, you have big, deep, rough furrows of soil that's been turned over. And when you're 4 years old, those things are pretty much as deep as your legs are long. So it was no small effort to hurdle over those and hop top to top to get to the middle of that field. But we came together all excited. I can just see it in my mind's eye now, like 2 puppies, running out there and meeting each other, and their tongues hanging out and our tails wagging. And we have been friends for 65 years.
Wow.
And he and his wife just bought a nice home in St. George and retired there. And we just had an amazingly good time. I needed to go to Orderville, Utah. And the quickest way to get there from St. George is to go through Zion's National Park. And if any of you know what Zion's is, it is a beautiful, beautiful park. But the mountains and the rock structures in there are astonishing. So on Saturday, we drove through the park to get there. It took us a while. It was the Utah Education Association weekend, so the kids were out of school, extra traffic in the park, but we weren't in a hurry. We really enjoyed our transversing the park and visiting about all kinds of things. We didn't quit talking for 3 days. And that's not unlike what I'm experiencing here this morning. Coming together, as friends from these different places, and we've done that in the past and got to know each other. So as far as what I anticipate for the call this morning, I see that Susan's outside, and I don't know why it's lighter in Arizona than it is in Las Vegas yet, but I'm going to join her out there in a minute. So I'll be going off camera at some point and putting the computer outdoors and enjoying the sunrise this morning. And Susan, I've been able to do that every day for the last few days because my friend had this gorgeous patio outside their kitchen that faced the sun site. That's for you, Richard.
Yep.
It faced the sun site every morning. And we had some wonderful visits out there. So I'm sure we'll have another one this morning. Having said that, welcome. And we will get started. Joe, if you'll pull up whatever page we're on. I don't have my book with me, so I'll leave it to you to decide where we are. I'm going to go off camera for just a second, guys, and get some water. I'll be right back.
Sorry, can everybody see my screen? Okay, and then so this is, I believe we covered this last week. So I think we're on the last page here with octave scaling. Does that sound about right to everyone? Does anybody have desire to read? I have no problem reading if
We covered this.
oh, we covered. Okay. Oh yeah. Yes, that was so then we're on. Thought we had one more page to go for some reason. So chapter 13.
There
From
we are.
Electrons, atoms to snowflakes to superclusters. Okay, we'll get started here. Does anybody wish to read? If not, I have no problem reading myself.
Go for it, Joe.
Okay, so chapter 13, from electrons to atoms to snowflakes to superclusters. The model of an isotropic vector matrix as the zero-phase cosmometry is, for all intents and purposes, purely conceptual, given that it is not directly observable or measurable. It is fair to wonder, then, whether we can find any indication of this basic cosmometry out here in the macro world of nature and the cosmos. Can the four-dimensional hexagonal geometry of the vector equilibrium and the isotropic vector matrix, tetrahedral octahedral matrix, be seen to influence the dynamics of energy in the physical universe? To explore this possibility, here are a few examples of how we may, in fact, be observing the presence of the vector equilibrium isotropic vector matrix energetic symmetry in the patterns of physical structures across vast scales. Electron spin in a honeycomb lattice. In a 2016 paper entitled Spain and the Honeycomb Lattice, Lessons from Graphene, researchers Matthew Mecklenburg and B.C. Reagan describe a triangular chessboard matrix that exactly maps the up blue and down yellow spin states of electrons in a sheet of graphene. This triangulated tile pattern and hexagonal lattice matches the two-dimensional isotropic vector matrix we saw in Chapter 9. Extending this polarized triangular matrix into a tetrahedral space results in the same isotropic arrangement as the 64 tetrahedron matrix. The caption from the paper's image suggests that such a discrete chessboard-like structure to space, electrons are thought to spin, even though they are pure point particles with no surface that can possibly rotate. Recent work on graphene shows that the electron space might arise because the space at very small distances is not too smooth, but rather segmented like a chessboard. The standard cartoon of an electron shows a spinning sphere with positive and negative angular momentum as illustrated in blue or gold above. However, such cartoons are fundamentally misleading. Compelling experimental evidence indicates that electrons are ideal point particles with no finite radius or internal structure that could possibly spin. A quantum mechanical model of electron transport in graphene, a single layer of graphite, shown as a black honeycomb, presents a possible resolution of this puzzle. An electron in graphene hops from carbon atom to carbon atom as if moving on a chessboard with triangular tiles. At low energies, the individual tiles are unresolved, but the electron acquires an internal spin quantum number which reflects whether it is on the blue or the gold tiles. The electron spin could arise not from rotational motion of its substructure, but rather from its discrete chessboard-like structure of space. Does anybody have any comments up to this point or wish to kind of speak about anything that we've covered just yet? Or I can keep reading and we can come back to some of the things that we've talked about or that are talked about.
Did I understand well that he's saying that the spin of electron as described in quantum mechanics is in actual fact just a stationary phase?
That it's a spin state?
No, he say the spin is not actually the spin or the structure, but the appearance of a stationary wave, like on a chessboard.
Yeah.
And yes, So if you
Yes.
have the honeycomb, look at the structure there. It's not that the gray or the gold is actually spinning. It's something that is spinning. It is that we're seeing on a stationary wave one spot and another, say at different time. Did I understand? Does it make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, it does make sense.
If you take a checkered board, and if your ability to see is just to see black and white, you will not be in a position to see that the black and white are actually just a reflection of a space that is represented by that checkered board.
Yeah,
Because if the effect that you see, if you can never see the black and white at the same time, then you have an issue. And you can only interpret the black as, the phase of a particle. You understand what I'm trying to say?
yeah. So yeah,
You imply a
it's
spin. You
it's a s-
imply a spin to show that there is black and white.
right. No, I mean, I think that that's an important point, considering the previous points, when we're talking about being able to contrast, to what's the boundary,
Mhm.
and being able to contrast like what is black and white, so the ability to see them both at the same time.
Yeah, because what he says is that the reality is the IVM all over.
Correct.
Okay. So is the IVM all over? The IVM all over is like a checkered board.
And I think that that's a great point, because
Okay.
yeah,
And because of a duality, there are two modes. There's black and white on the checkerboard, on the stationary wave. You get me?
yes,
There is, because if it results from, let's say, some deformation of a surface, you see, I have this way. Look at this. This is the same. I have this and I have that. This and that. That pattern. You see what I mean?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, this is the trough of it. This is the anti-trough. This is the convex. This is the concave.
Concave and convex.
Yes. And all of that alternate. Not alternate. It is repeating at fractals. Because it's the concave and convex that is the unity.
Right.
Now, all right. So if you want to see subunity, we have to do it in phases, in that our ability to see will have to flip. Right? I could only see the white page. Now, I think, and this is just some figment of my imagination, that I have to do this. This thing is doing this for me to see. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is it's still the same stuff. So I conclude that because this thing, my ability to see implies that it is in this position, I invoke a spin to explain it. It is something that was a sphere that was turning.
Yeah.
Right.
Almost
Right?
like the Earth rotating through the light.
Yes. So
Exactly.
if you're on the sun, that's what you see. So you see day and night. What a day and night is one and the same thing, of some depend. It's just relative. Because if there were two suns, somebody else will see something.
Right.
So what he's saying here is that is unified. It's not a particle. It's not a particle that is separated. that is spinning and showing one side and the other.
Yeah,
That's,
no, and
that's why I talk about that honeycomb structure. The fact that you have a gold and blue doesn't mean that it's different things.
correct.
And
Yeah,
remember that that
seems
resulted from the two tetrahedra coming together in duality in that way. Remember?
yes.
That was it. That is the image that we're seeing. I don't know if it makes sense, but that's what I
It makes
understand.
I mean, I think that you actually made perfect sense. No, and in the sense that we've seen actually these types of examples, you know, kind of throughout the book itself. But you're right, it's based on your perspective and your ability to perceive things and understanding the relationship between the yellow and blue. And so having that understanding allows us to make that kind of distinction, but it also, we understand the relationship between the yellow and blue. And that,
And
yeah,
never forget that what we call wave of is electromagnetic, right? And electromagnetic doesn't mean that they are side by side like this. It means that they are there. They are meshed together.
that's right.
Second consideration, we are not outside of it.
That's right. That's, yeah.
We are observing the mesh from inside.
But being able to understand that it is a mesh
Yes.
is,
And our ability to observe something that is close to reality is the ability to go with a mind out in a larger dimension in order to fold it back to where around us they understand. It's only when we understand this honeycomb structure that what we see in our world is just the folding of it, that we understand that, how will I call it? The cosmometry of our space-time.
all said.
Yes.
Yeah, and the paper itself actually looks very interesting to me. I've not read it. I don't know if anybody else has read it here, but be interested to hear. But Richard, you have your hand up.
Yeah, a lot of things I guess are starting to sort of percolate. One I look at it's interesting in terms of the perception of diagrams. He chose to describe the presence of the up and down triangles, and he's put in the sort of wireframe of the hexagon. And I also see that display, of course, on the page is two-dimensional. And I also see the up and down tetrahedron, two-dimensional tetrahedron, and wonder if anybody else sees that. One has a blue middle triangle, and the other one has a yellow middle
Exactly.
triangle.
Yes.
And so it's kind of interesting in terms of this perception and the understanding of, if I've got it right, particles and waves, that they can be one or the other almost at the same time. And the other one that's interesting for me is the language of what we see, and quantum mechanics. And it's almost like we keep trying to materialize a sight. And what I'm getting at is that if the quantum sort of searching for the basic building block has never found anything that represents the basic building block, all it finds is relationships. It's really saying to us that not everything is seeable, and there are some things that are unseeable, and that to me is the structure of human relationships. You can see the human or the material side of something, but you can't see the interrelationship. It's a no-seeum, and you have to see it through a metaphor of some kind, or you have to see it understanding that it's a no-seeum. And that's the struggle I think we all have in social relationships, that we want to turn the no-seeums, the relationships, into something that can be seen. We want to materialize it. And so I have some trouble understanding the language of quantum mechanics, because the mechanics side of that phrase suggests that it's material and seeable. The quantum side suggests that perhaps it's unseeable. So I've always had some trouble wondering how the quantum mechanic concept was put together the way it is. And I think it's getting at what Manu was talking about in terms of, and what the chapter is talking about in terms of not being able to see the spin, but we conceptualize it. And when we say that the spin is not there, I then come back to, I think it comes from Bucky's work, but the 6 kinds of movements that have to do with spin and rotation and torque and so forth. So it's just raising a lot of questions for me, and it's also telling me that my my eyes will be able to see the up and down triangles, it'll be able to see the hexagons, and it should be able to see the up and down tetrahedron in that 2-dimensional matrix.
Yeah,
So
no, I mean, I appreciate that. And just really quickly to the point of the seen and unseen, I think that this is important when you're talking about relationships in general. One thing that I had read, not till, I mean, years ago, but I had spoken about recently when they were talking about the written rules and the unwritten rules. So that you have the physical or the written rules, and then this isn't in as far as making a structure work as our government, right?
well, just
you're not
the
you're not
other
gonna be
one,
able to capture, you're not
the
going to be
other
able to
thing is,
capture everything, right? So that the idea, you're not going to capture everything. You'll have written rules, and then there are behaviors that have a relationship with one another that would work with the written rules, but it's the unwritten rules that make the system work. So,
but when
in other
you
words,
say that, and then you can go into the concept of tensegrity, and that's often, I think, what's pointed out in tensegrity too. It's not the compression element that make things work; it's the tension element, the cable element of the suspension bridge. And in the same way, it just struck me now that the importance of that face-to-face meeting and it's exemplified in you and Manu meeting, all of a sudden to me says that's another sort of emphasis on the importance of the material, the importance of seeing each other face to face, to see the body, the material part of the relationship. And so it's revered, in a sense, more so than the relational sort of experience that has been going on, and as you described or mentioned, 15 years. But almost like it's not complete until the material sort of body to body experience happens. And that to me says, again, we're so ingrained into the idea of the materialism of universe, and not the immaterial or the metaphysical. Does that make any sense? This is all coming
Yeah,
out
I
of
mean,
our discussion and the reading.
yeah, no, I mean, I see what you're saying. But yeah, just going back to the example that I was just using again, with the written and versus the unwritten rules, in order to make a structure, to give it substance. I was specifically referring to how political institutions work. That the institution itself, there's the idea of it, and then how we interact with each other essentially provides the structure with stability, and it's not all written down. So you write down a set of rules that we can abide by, but it's the unwritten rules, meaning that how we adhere to them is what gives it meaning. So the idea that you're not going to, and this is what comes to be problematic now in the United States, it's that we use the written rules in ways that they were not intended. And that's violating the unwritten rules. And so that relationship that is created between policymakers, that is, they have these, the physical, and then they have the interpersonal relationships, and that how this mix and this dance, if you will, works, is how the institution itself is actually remains valid, and that institution can be an idea. So then I think that's a way of kind of coming back to some of the things that you're talking about, when you're talking about the relationships between the physical and the non-physical. And then you're talking about in terms of quantum, to what degree of predictability there is and things along those lines. And so anyway, Manu, you have your hand up.
Let me unmute myself. Yes, I was just going to share a few stuff in that it was, if you see, if you look at that picture on this page here, you will see the two spheres, one going up and one coming down in terms of orientation. You see that? You see the poles. You see?
Yeah. Oh yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
All
Yeah.
right.
The pole. Yeah,
Now,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is this. If I have this space, this sheet, I try to say that it is horizontal, right? And like flat. Okay? If anything influences and it does this, It's still the same sheet, isn't it? Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
But all of a sudden you have this and that. You have a crest and a trough. Right?
Mhm.
Because it is curved. And the only way that we see that there's a crest and a trough is if we were out of here, because if we were an ant, you know, just walking and not imagining anything, we wouldn't feel anything. Maybe we'll be tired, but we'll still see flat. Because our perspective is always that of a pain. All right? I'll be climbing here and coming down there without the possibility of seeing anything else. So this to say, the duality come out of one property, that is that of curvature. That's the first thing that I want to show here. It comes out of curvature. If there's curvature, then there's a distinction between part of something and another part of the same thing. So there's inside, outside, there's up or down, there is whatever that you want, that coexists to make the whole what it is. It could be this, it could be that. Second thing that I wanted to share was this one, was that an experience that I had. I shared with a friend of mine who is a civil engineer out in Boston to say that the cube is inherently unstable. He was adamant that I'm an idiot. And his assertion came from the fact, I guess, that he built thousands of structures. And it's always cube that he built. But what he forgets is that he has foundation that he put to anchor the stuff. And that there's trust that he put. And there are this reinforcement. So it's no more a cube in a pure principle as per se. What I'm trying to say here is that the practice of doing something give us habits. And those habits influence in turn the way we model some principles that have been, or something that we observe. We say is a solid, we say it is, that the cube is stable, whereas it's not. If you take a cube with a magnet that we have, and then the spheres, and then you build it, it will always kind of fall if you push it a little bit. So that is an unstable, by definition, an unstable equilibrium. But if you build a tetrahedron, even you push it hard, it's going to stand to a certain level. That is stable. You get what I'm trying to say?
Sure.
So, yes, we do a lot of induction from our experience. And sometimes it makes sense in our understanding. And that's why Bucky say the boundary of universe is always moving. We thought that this was something, the truth, this was true, and it withstood the test of truth to a certain point. After that, it's going to be dismissed. Because if this is proven to be what it is, then that is our understanding. And then the other understanding became obsolete. Or obsolete means only true within a very, very restrained domain.
No, I mean, I very much appreciate that, and especially the idea of, because I mean, ultimately, we're looking at patterns, and those patterns manifest themselves in our behaviors, meaning the habits that we actually then develop based off of the models we have, and how that relates to essentially our perception and how what we perceive to be true. But the idea that how boundaries and things are always changing. And I really appreciated actually the boundary of universe is always moving. That actually brings a lot of context to me too. As far as Bucky's approach for understanding the universe.
Times we were trying to work through what you would call, models, that all models are false, some models are helpful. And one of the things Mike kept saying is the map is not the territory.
Correct.
And it's somewhat amazing how often we as humans start to think that our perception is it's our own internal reality, but I think we forget that it's not the reality.
Mhm.
Who
And
is
in order
Mike,
to,
Susan?
pardon?
Who is Mike?
Mike is one of the there was a kind of a husband wife that were with me in Egypt. So
Okay.
and he is a decidedly not mathematical person. So there were all different characters that got attracted to this work, some of which were very much kind of more like Manu, very wonderful with numbers and relations, and then other people who were poets. So we had a variety of folks, but I just love that the map is not the territory. And in order for us to perceive anything, we collapse at least one dimensionality of what it actually is.
Okay, I have a hard time with that one. Because as we have gotten deeper into these repeated expressions of the same thing, meaning we have energy radiating from some source. We have that traveling at high speeds. It's reduced systematically until it precisely vibrates at a frequency that will make it a certain element in the earth, a certain element on the basic tables, and all of those come together to form the molecules that form the substances that make the earth what it is. I see nothing but math in all of that. How is there any territory without math?
No, not math, map. M-A-P.
Oh,
Yeah.
map. Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay. All right.
So the map
Right.
is not the territory.
I get that.
So,
I get
yeah.
that. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. No, it's just a speaker, I'm sure.
Stable datum, baby.
There you go.
Anybody else have any comments? I mean, the structure below that, the honeycomb there.
Well, to Susan's point, I mean, if the math isn't the territory, what is? But in terms of the map not being the territory, I'm amused. We were sailing in British Columbia years ago, and we were going back into Princess Louisa Sound. It's a very narrow passage. You go back in about 20 miles and then through an even narrower little rivulet that comes out of the sound. And so it was some fun sailing and kind of challenging, but our GPS kept showing that our boat was on land. And the map isn't the territory.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's just a representation. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily directly map to experience.
At the same
So-
time, I'm astounded at the precision of the technology that was handed down to us, starting with sailors navigating with sextants and things.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when you get down to cartographers, I owned the 5 acres that our cabin was on in eastern Utah, was part of a 1,000-acre subdivision that was done back in the 50s. This was well before any GPS equipment. So they are surveying off of the Denver, Colorado base meridian and using chains and rods. I mean, literally dragging chains through the brushes to determine angles and distances and things. And so my boundaries of the lot weren't marked. And I wanted to know where my corners were because I was anticipating fencing, and I wanted to know, when we were on our property, when we weren't. And there was a beautiful cliff toward the back of the property that I wondered, is that really on my property? How far does it go down into the gully? So I brought a surveyor out from Salt Lake using GPS equipment. And when he got the corners staked, lo and behold, we were able to find the old steel that had been pounded in the ground in the 50s within inches of that GPS marking. How did they do that? How did they do that under those conditions with such crude equipment? And yet they did. So the map is often not the territory in real estate. I'm looking at a piece of property right now. Somebody wants me to build something on for them, and the neighbor has block walls on the property. And you'd normally see a permanent masonry block wall and think that's the lot line, that's my boundary. No, these lots were probably intentionally placed 1.5 feet onto the neighbor's property. So there's an extra 1.5 feet of dirt on my client's side of that wall. And so the question becomes, do we build on that? Do we asphalt it? Can we? Are we allowed? So we have to work out a boundary line agreement
Yes.
that says that we will go ahead and improve that little strip of land so it's not an eyesore to you or to us, but it's still yours. We're not making any claim on the dirt. The pins are still where the pins are. And the map is not the territory.
Yes.
I have some neighbors who just, I guess, collectively decided in another part of my neighborhood to push the back walls of their backyard into the middle of the alley. The alley disappeared.
Oh, okay. We have a solution for that. It's called a bulldozer.
Well, but somebody has to be motivated to want to enforce that. But it's just like, Their boundaries are interesting ideas.
People have died over them, of course.
Yes.
Still, I mean, case in point, Israel and Lebanon.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's it's important to be able to distinguish boundaries that are in nature and ones that are actually artificially constructed. So that
But
then-
those, yeah, Joe, sorry to
Go ahead. No,
interrupt.
go ahead.
But those always interplay.
Correct. And that's coming back to the point
Yes.
of the relationship between them. And so and that ability to make that distinction, though, I would say is kind of essential to understanding what it is means to work within nature, as opposed to kind of allowing things to be imposed on ourselves, essentially. And so sometimes we tend to look at the way things are and think that they cannot be changed, and that's they're artificially constructed and not necessarily representative of reality. And that comes back to one of Wayne's points, is the ability to be precise with new tools. But these new tools still have limitations. So that this comes back to some of the fundamental understandings about what is predictable and what isn't predictable. And again, I think about this in terms of something even as like digital twins that are now being constructed, which are actually much more accurate depictions of reality. But it's still the map. And understanding that is critical. it's not the territory. So that principle still holds true.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
now you contrast map and not the territory.
Not contrast. It's in conjunction with.
But what I'm trying to get at is that talking about the map is not the the territory is not the map. There's an implication in there that the map is wrong and the territory is correct.
No.
No?
Yeah, I agree, Richard.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd like to hear that because go ahead.
Well, what I'm getting at is that it puts us into that opposition idea that one's right, one's wrong. And yet we know that if you don't have a good roadmap, a good map, certainly in the old days, a good paper map, it was very difficult to get from A to B in terms of the actual territory. So it's the if you want the cooperation, the interconnection between map and territory, that is really what's important. So it's the interwovenness, maybe that's what Manu was getting at, the interwovenness of map and territory, not the separation. And in other words, it's a different view of dualism. I've been taking the concept of duality in its sort of separation form. And others talk about duality in terms of its integrated form. And most of the time when we hear the words duality or dual, we don't really stop to think about or even ask the other person, if you want, or declare our position on what we mean by duality. And it's almost like duality is a particle wave kind of concept, that sometimes we're speaking from the wave part of it, and sometimes the particle parts. And we're not very precise in making it clear as to whether or not we're talking about one kind of duality versus the other kind.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say this really quickly. So it's almost like just saying something about theory and practice. Right.
Well, that's the other thing. And theory and practice are often set up in the duality of practice is right, theory is usually wrong.
I don't even, yeah, but
you know, and I experienced that in teaching at the university, and you have the critics of saying, yeah, those academic guys, those gown people, they're all theory. There's nothing practical about what they're doing. And so I have to go to this theory place to get some kind of concrete paper that says I have a degree in something, and then I can go out and I can apply it. I can apply practice, and very often people have separated the two so much that they go into the gown experience, learn what the gown teaches you, come back out and return to the practice that you had before you got the gown. And so it's almost like it's a waste of time for the educational structure to set itself up the way it is, if the attitude is that I just need to go there to get a piece of paper to allow me to do what I was doing in the first place. And And so you
Well-
get this town gown separation as if the two of them aren't integrated in some way.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, it leads to kind of you know, why am I doing this in the first place problem. But coming back to what you were saying, I think that there is an element of balance that absolutely needs to be struck, and it is a dance. You know, being
Yeah, well,
the
just
idea.
stay on that for a minute. Balance and dance are again have different
Meaning.
meanings.
Sure.
Balance
Right.
by definition is stillness. Dance by definition is movement.
Right, and the two work together, and that makes harmony, so that you can be balanced and moving, and so that the idea then, so this is the dual is stillness. I'm standing still, and then that's not movement, and so there's this no, the two work in harmony with one another, and so just thinking about theory and practice again, I think that there are times that there may be too much theory and not enough practice, and the goal needs to be in balance with
Well,
having in
speak
ethics. Oh, wait a minute,
the other side as
just let me
well.
finish, just let me finish.
It can be too much practice.
But well, you're right, exactly. So this comes back to right measure and judgment and all those other things, but so with ethics in particular, that one of the things that they in philosophy is that it can't be just philosophy for philosophy's sake. It has to be something that can be practiced. But philosophy is your theory of how your practices need to be, how your actions need to be integrated with your theories. And that's the practical aspect. And so there's the relationship between the two that are absolutely, that's essential. Anybody that says, oh, they're just theoretical is ignoring the fact that they actually have a theory. So, I mean, everybody's got a theory. It's now whether they can express that in words is different. But they have a theory. Because they're basing their actions off a set of patterns. And so they may not be as intentional, but that again, that's a little bit different. So it's just important to not to recognize how these things work in conjunction with one another, not in opposition of each other, to your point. But there is this other element of it is being too theoretical and to the point where it has no meaning in physical reality.
It seems to me, Joe, that some of this comes back to the Euclidean mindset. You know, I demand that everything be perceived by my senses. So
Right.
the map is not the territory. The map that my GPS was showing me definitely was not the territory. But in other times, the map is very helpful in defining the territory that I'm not perceiving with my own senses. Because I'm distorted or I'm disoriented. On the other side, we say that you know, that reality is better than theory. Well, that depends on what reality is. And if we're not willing to venture intellectually and perceptually into that etherical world, that world of possibilities, that world of dynamic energy expression, that is the foundation and the backdrop to everything, then we're limiting ourselves tremendously. That's Bucky saying that 99.99% of reality is imperceptible by our five senses. So if we're demanding that there be no theory, or that theory is always inferior to whatever we call reality, I think we're stuck to some degree. I think we restrict
Sure.
our to a great degree, because if we don't venture into the possibility and expand our minds to think about what is theoretically possible, then we stay where we are. There's no evolution in that. There's no progress in that. There's no productivity in that. There's no advancement in that. And we surely don't solve problems that way. So there's your dance again, from one to the other. And I think the dance is tensegrity at the end of the day.
You know, and I think that this maps on nicely to other ideas. I mean, a lot of different ideas, but I think I really liked how you used the term, you know, that we're actually stuck and that there's no possibilities. If you think about it in terms of how we look at things like information, knowledge, and wisdom, right? And wisdom is the ability to ask why something is being done in the first place. And so then you say, why am I doing this? And do I need to do it? As opposed to things just being dictated down onto you where you're like, how? And so when information is just coming in, I would say that you're just reacting. And this is what I was getting to a moment ago, even by intentional. How intentional you can be is based on your theory. Because your theory gives you as to the question as to why am I doing this? And I have a theory as to how things hold together, so to speak. And then once I have that, then I can start to ask questions about the data that's coming in, so to speak. And I can know how to do something. So there could be you know, I'm sure, Wayne, you have plenty of people that work for you that that have an incredible ability to put things together, structures together based off of their experiences. And so they know how to do it. You know, they're able to react to circumstances that they're in, their specific experiences, which is the practical side. But I would suggest, and I'm not, you know, passing any kind of judgment on the workers, but at all. But maybe your ability to ask why the hell we're doing this in the first place is kind of that more important question. Like, is this providing a service to someone? You know, is this providing, you know, is this building meaningful? You know, is anybody going to need it in the first place? So that's possibilities. When you're starting to explore those types of ideas, well, maybe we don't need this structure, maybe we need another. And so
there
that's
you
the
have
why.
it, Joe. There you have it. Is there anything that exists in reality that wasn't at some point first theoretical?
Right. It isn't. Whether it's intentional or not is different. But theoretic, no. We always have a theory based off the information that we're actually being fed. Now,
well, every idea had to first
Yeah.
start as an idea. Everything that became a piece of reality had to start as an idea. I'm sitting on a chair here on my son's patio. It's kind of a nice chair. He's got a whole set of them. They're made of metal, but the metal looks like wood, and they have cushions, and there's a nice little button on that cushion that's countersunk that has sort of an Aztec design. All of that flowed out of somebody's mind and then was put on in a design drawing and then reduced to how we're going to build that and put together and how it gets marketed and how it finds its way to this patio. All of that started in theory.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it all starts in theory, and then but the possibility aspect of it is understanding the theory. It's having that, and that's wisdom. Again, it's having an understanding versus not just well, I know how that's done. But yeah, asking yourself if you know why it's done in the first place allows you to reimagine things. So yeah, no, everything exists to theory. Whether people are aware of the theory or not is different. I'd argue that's the point of education. So that comes back to what Richard was saying a little bit earlier. For people that actually dismiss theory, they're completely misguided, because you can't completely dismiss theory. But there is an element of balance, or, in the sense that to what degree, how theoretical you're being. In other words, if you're all theory, well, then nothing ever gets built, and that's that's a problem. But I would also surmise that that highlights the importance of relationships more than anything else. So you have educational institutions that are focused on theoretical ideas that then get used by various just say people in various trades, and it could be something in medical, could be something in computer, that people come up with theories and then they get put into practice, and so that has a relationship with not only yourself but also the other. So the relationship between Wayne, you, and your workers is one of, I would say, provides something greater emerges from that than just say if you were working in isolation of one another. And so the fact that you're able to add the strategy, write the books, think of the financial instruments that are necessary, and that
Well,
they're able to go to
yeah.
work.
And
So
that goes back to, I think, what Richard said earlier about the relationship aspect of all this. Here's one. I don't know if this is relevant or not. Let's explore it together. I'm sitting on the patio. It's a beautiful morning. I was here a year ago. I'm looking around me, and the yard here, especially the patio at this moment, isn't as well maintained as it was last year. So I'm asking myself, theoretically, what's going on with my son? Is he overburdened? Is he working so hard that he's not, able to spend as much time here as he did? And in different spots in the home, I'm seeing that, not to a degree that, I mean, it's beautiful, everything's wonderful, but just it's not quite as pristine as it was. So to me, that's not a physical thing. It's not like, oh, it needs to be cleaned up. I'm thinking, what's this a sign of? What's the stress point in this family? What's going on here with my family that they're not keeping up as well as they might have been a year ago? They're probably at 95%. And what about my grandsons that are, lounging around while their dad does everything? What's going on with that? Should I be concerned about that element in their lives? And maybe as a grandpa here on vacation, I could say, hey guys, let's surprise your dad. Let's go out there today and blow off the leaves off the deck and spruce up a little bit, and really surprise him so he doesn't have to do that. I wonder how they would respond to that. Theoretically, there's a great possibility they might say, all right. There's another that might say, oh no, grandpa, we're too busy. We've got, important things to do. So does that have any relevance in what we're talking about?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's everything that we're talking about, to tell you the truth. So the first part is that obviously you're asking your son an important question. He's working really hard, right?
Maybe I knew.
I'm sure he is. I mean, not more than you know, but I'm sure he's working really hard. And what happens is sometimes if we're only at that functional level and we're not necessarily using that theory and coming up with a theory of and what is determining what is important to us, we lose sight of why we're doing something in the first place. And that's a really important point, right? So all of a sudden, we're just in operational mode. And we forget that, well, I wanted to build, this deck in it's beautiful. It's at 95%. But if I built it, then what was the reason I built it in the first place if I'm going to let it go? So maybe I'm spending too much time in this operational mode and not enough time on the things that I was the reason I was doing it in the first place. And that comes back to knowing as to why we're doing something. And this is really kind of determining what is the underlying value of all the actions that I'm taking. So having that understanding will have a real impact on reality, because it'll say, how much time should I allocate to what? You know, and how much energy needs to be allocated to a particular task. And this is the thing of really kind of where rubber really hits the road. Now you're talking about energy and where energy needs to be directed and how to optimize energy. And I was just in a conference last week where we talked quite a bit about optimization of energy with between GPUs and CPUs. And so understanding those optimizations is critical in order to maximize the use of assets, so that we're not using energy unnecessarily, which would actually you know, essentially cause us, it would actually cause us to use the energy unnecessarily and essentially take away from what it is that we're actually trying to accomplish and make things more expensive. So no, I think that this is what Wayne, you just had brought up, is that how to direct the way we use our energy within things, and actually understanding the connections between the why we're doing something and what we're doing. Yeah, I mean, I think that your son was actually a great example of that. And he would be wise to actually listen to the question. So that's the reason why we have conversations, is get that feedback. So maybe dad comes over and says something and reminds us of what's really important.
Yeah. Indeed.
So we keep going, or there is another section there talking about.
Are we starting a new section? Is that a new page?
It's page. It's this. So we'll be starting a new state of water, which is actually pretty interesting.
I'd probably suggest we hold on that. It looks like a whole topic that we'll only get partway into. We're actually
I'm really
just to wrap up.
Yeah, this is probably a good place to
And
wrap
about
up.
on time with 6 of us. So depending on how excited we are to share this one. Okay, well,
Yeah.
thank you. This is a very relaxed discussion this morning. Very cool. Manu, I'm going to start with you. You're in my upper left, and you're our guest in the US this week. So how are you feeling, and what's your takeaway this morning?
I think you're on mute.
You're muted, Manu. You're muted, Manu.
I say I'm grateful, and my current feeling, I kind of express them in the chat box. I don't know if anybody has the opportunity to read. In that, theory without practice is useless, and practice without theory is dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And Richard criticized the word balance. Yes, I agree with him. We should talk about equilibrium. because equilibrium allow you to talk if it's static or dynamic. And it refers to things that movement that find a pattern to repeat it in a way that looks stable. And then I think that there is a hierarchy of questions. Becky writes that life starts with awareness of the otherness. So life starts with what? What is it that I'm seeing? What is it that I'm feeling? What is it that looks different? Right? So it's like life starts with a distortion. You have a domain, space-time, and there is a distortion, a curvature. I'm aware of it. That is what is this? What? Then I start imagining, I start structuring to understand what it is. And then why is it like that? Because now, because life continues, the why will instruct me about the purpose of it. Why is it there? But the key to it is that any one of them cannot exist just on its own, because it becomes an ideology, basically living in a phase of something that's complex that is multi-phases. So we, to come to what Richard is saying, we here are all phases of the dance of life on this planet. I am a phase that I'm living now in Irvine. Wayne is living it in Vegas. Suzanne is in Phoenix. Joe is in Philadelphia. Anne is in Kuala Lumpur. And we all participate in a dance. We are contributing, each sequentially, sometime in turbulence. Joe was, to this dance. And if you say, okay, Manu is a word, it means nothing. Just an ideology. So truth is plural. And truth is dynamic. And truth conjugate. That is, it expresses a dance. That's what I take away. And I think that is very powerful. Once we tune ourselves and our minds into that disposition, then we start having an idea about where the hole for the key of truth is. And that's my major takeaway. Otherwise, I'm really grateful. I'm grateful to life. I'm grateful to Providence. And I'm grateful to all of you guys. You are good friends. And you are real friends. Thank you. Suzanne, how do you feel? What do you take away?
I feel very appreciative that everybody's been sharing at such a level. And it feels like we ended up spending the second half of the call back on the concept of duality. And Manu, my thought on duality, the first thing I hear is Manu says that in a duality, one thing necessitates the other. And so, Richard, I heard that it was a big trigger for you between practice and theory, and that you feel underappreciated is what I got out of that. But I do love the invitation that every time I get into that tensegrity of a polarity, to remember that both sides are necessary, to appreciate both, to try and look for the other, because, like Manu, what you're saying with the convex, concave, the boundaries are moving, how do I sense that? And Wayne, I think one of the other things that, you and Steve in particular invite me to consider is that there are ways that humans can go beyond their senses and really dropping into that meditative direct connect with source. I think there is this not as well defined way that we can perceive if we are able to step out of our human perspective and maybe look at it from perspective of source. So I'm hopeful to learn to do that more and more. And I love that no matter which way you consider what we're trying to perceive, that there's more information, and loving that word this past couple months, that has been a gift, the word information. And so starting to look at, well, hey, if that's a formation, how did it get there? And appreciate those kind of movements. So Richard, how are you feeling and what are you taking away?
Well, I'm feeling energized actually by our discussion and my own sort of coming to understanding of duality. And so one of the first things that happens for me around duality is that my mind goes to the Descartes mind matter separation. And that takes me to the notion of what I keep referring to in my field now as pre-20th century science, that's based on this the separation of duals. And then we come to the 20th century and into this century, and duality is seen as that interconnectedness, that enmeshment that Manu is talking about. And it really brings into play the importance of the relation between things. It helps me fully understand why unity is not oneness, it's plural, it's minimum two. And that in that minimum two, there is the implicit or maybe the explicit notion of relationship. So now we're into tensegrity. We have the tension and the thing, if you want, working together. And just so speak briefly about this theory and practice and feeling, if you want, undervalued it from the university level. It was interesting. I introduced chaos theory to students to try and get them to rethink the traditional notion of equilibrium as being static. And that if you're in crisis, you've gone from a state of equilibrium into disequilibrium, and the idea is to get you back to the previous state of equilibrium. Well, if that previous state was horrible, why would you want to go back to it, kind of thing. But anyway, my students, in some respects, they revolted. They thought this chaos theory thing was way too theory, way too much theory. And then when they went out into the practice world, their field practicums, and they started coming back, and they started to say, oh my gosh, this idea of a dynamic equilibrium, this robustness, the fluxness of living is actually more realistic than what we had been taught before, or even what we had learned from our own grassroots practical world. And so all of a sudden they had a different appreciation for the importance of theory and the practical implications of that. So in that sense, I probably went from feeling undervalued to all of a sudden having students say, hey, you weren't so bad after all. There is a practical element, and it's an even better practical element of what we were doing than before. So that, And that to me was just another example of trying to take the separateness, duality separateness, and combine it into the integrated duality that I think is the difference between Bohm's divided worldview, which I say is a pre-20th century view from a science perspective, and the undivided whole view that he articulated, which I think is a 20th century science. And I think undivided whole is the kind of wholeness that Fuller is talking about in terms of the notion of whole to part thinking versus part to whole thinking. So I got a lot out of today in all kinds of different ways. And Anne, how are you feeling, and what's your takeaway today?
Oh, you're muting it. Oh, there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I spent the time actually trying to stay awake. Yeah. So sorry about that. So
Did I
sorry
speak
about
too
that.
much?
No, no offense to the to the
Joe has
company
a
here.
very soothing voice.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think anyway. It's been a. I had a very tough meeting this morning. And I think it kind of showed up, in the tiredness. But anyway, so for me, I'm just appreciative to be here. Really, really appreciative. And this going down this path of this honeycomb lattice thing, just the idea of the honeycomb, and the fact that we are all here together in different locations, as was brought up earlier as well, and just catching up with all of you. I think that for me is it's a pleasure to be here. Okay. Beyond that, I hope you will contribute more next week. And whose turn is it to speak next? Wayne. Okay. Wayne, how do you feel, and what's your takeaway today?
First of all, Anne, I feel great that you go to the effort of joining us each week so late at night. Oh, Joe hasn't gone yet. I'm sorry.
No, thanks.
Oh, Joe.
thank-
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, I
Thank
jumped the
you.
gun.
Okay.
So yeah, no, I mean, I really appreciate actually today's call, because I'm thinking about this in terms of initially, just coming back to one of the points is that what's in nature and what's not in nature, and the example that Wayne you used with the property line was an interesting example. So I always think about that in terms of what can be changed and what can't be changed, right? You're not going to change the entire earth, but you can change an artificial boundary, and work, to optimize that. The other question, the other thing is that I'm thinking about is change in general it's a really important thing to understand, is that when something should be optimized, meaning when you should optimize within the boundary, and when you can change the boundary. That is a really, really critical distinction to be able to make. Because I find that many times people will optimize a process, and not necessarily consider why the process existed in the first place. So that idea of change within that, when to do away with something and when not to do it. And people often make that mistake. They'll make these changes, or they'll optimize something, and not think about in connection to the whole, and or as to why they're doing something in the first place. And that comes back to a lot of the discussion that we were having, even Wayne, with the example that we were going over a moment ago. So the moment, meaning the example of keeping in mind what it is that we're doing in relation to what, right? It's always in relation to something else. So it's not in isolation. So sometimes people will optimize a process in isolation. And that has really negative effects. So part of this is all, I think, that we're thinking about in terms of senses. You know, what are the limitations of the sense data that we have? And then from the sense data that we have all the, you know, this is what we're being told by our immediate experience. But it really takes this idea of understanding why and courage, I would say, to make a decision when to take a risk as to change something. And that is an important distinction to be able to make. And I've been thinking about this in terms of the book that we're covering on Saturday. It was written by Amy Edmondson, in terms of also how this relates to mystique. Because one of the things that I think about all the time now is that what is it that all this new technology allows us to do? Well, I think it allows us to take new risks, right? And so, but understanding that there are going to be mistakes made. So having the idea of mystique and kind of being, you know, kind of that the idea of psychological safety within that framework and how that fits in. So I'm going to change something and there'll be a mistake made, and then not necessarily looking at it as a mistake as opposed to a lesson. And that gets back to this idea of being more childlike, what Bucky would say, and being playful. And so the way I also think about it in terms of like technology, again, is going to enable us to take more risks than anything else. And I think that that's a really cool and exciting advancement. The margin of error of making a mistake is not as great as it once was. And to me, that identifies progress. You know, so I'm thinking about all of this in terms of, again, what we've read and what we've discussed. Those are the two areas, is that when to take risks, when not to take risks, and our ability to take risks, and when to optimize something, and when to change something, and then recognizing what can be changed and can't be changed. All of those things that are actually interrelated to one another, and we discussed them all in very specific concrete circumstances, and you know, just coming back to the original point of the property line example that you started, Wayne. So those are areas that I think about often. And so helping me put a little bit more of a frame on that is important. So I appreciate that. So Wayne, how are you feeling? What are you taking away from today?
I continue to feel awe at the synthesis that seems to be taking place around all of these thoughts and concepts for me. In almost every area of my life right now, it seems like I feel this swirl of energy. I feel like I am in the vortex, and maybe in the center of it, and in the part that is centripetal, in that all this stuff that was out here in esoteric and theoretical in years past seems to be being sucked to the center and concentrated in a body of seeing that seems quite clear to me. It all makes sense. And you guys are all contributing to that. When I arrived here yesterday, Lincoln was still at work and Bree is at Disneyland with Bella for her 14th birthday. They're there for the weekend. And so it was just me and my two grandsons. The boys were here. They're actually only the older one was here when I got here because he'd already gotten home from school and the younger one wasn't home from school yet. And, you know, I got here and he helped me bring my luggage in and we sat down in the kitchen and I asked him, you know, how's school and what are you studying? He's just college age. And are you going to college? And, no, I haven't gone yet. I'm probably going to go in January. So what's going on? What are you going to study? And he said, well, computer programming and computer technology. I said, oh, interesting. And I asked him, how do you feel about AI? I had no idea the conversation that would launch. He expressed almost trepidation, like AI was going to wreck his world, you know. There's this boogeyman in the code somewhere. And then out of that spilled some expressions of his anxiety about school in general. He hadn't gone to school yet because he apparently is feeling like he can't go to school until he knows what he wants to do. And I said, what if you went to school just to figure out what you want to do? What if you just went and just poke around with some subjects, poke around with some subjects that you are interested in, even if it's just for fun. You know, it doesn't have to be in any direction, just for fun. Just learn for fun and explore. Let it be a process of exploration. He started to open up a little bit. And I told him that about the 40-year-old dentist that I heard speak one time that said, you know, some 18-year-old kid decided I was going to be a dentist and I hate it. What did he know about what my life would be at this point? And I said, sometimes I think we get dialed in too quickly to something at school that others want us to be, instead of really exploring what our passions are. So I talked about passion and purpose and how I believe everybody comes here with a piece of music that only they can play that's going to be a gift to humanity. And I think of Richard up in front of that student body and, you know, having that conversation every day with hundreds of kids and aggressive kids too, and kids who, you know, hey, you're the professor and you're sort of the enemy on certain days, and we're going to challenge you and we're here to assert ourselves. And yet he's trying to hand them this gift and they're just not getting it. Yesterday experience with my grandson was he got something. He by the time we finished that conversation, his whole energy changed. I talked to him about AI and I said, London, you have been born at the greatest time. You're going to see such marvelous things in your lifetime. And for every negative aspect of AI, there are going to be 100 positive aspects of it. It's going to change how we live. It's going to give you the power. You want to do computer programming. Do you understand what that means? That means that you can take what's in your mind and you can take the skills that you gain through school and you can look at a cause, be it a social cause or an economic cause or a charitable cause, and you can combine computer code to do certain specific tasks 24/7 while you're sleeping that will implement that in the world. You can change the world with what you're talking about learning. And he's always been a sensitive and very thoughtful boy, deep. And my sense of him over the years is he's almost withdrawn. It's like he doesn't quite belong here. You know, he's already beyond it or something. And so he's over here in the corner just watching it all go by and like, what a mess. And what am I supposed to do about this? And maybe I won't do anything today. But now he's trying to engage and figure out where his place is in it. And his whole demeanor had changed by the time we finished the conversation, because he seemed to see a runway that he could take off on. He seemed to have a little bit of a vision of a direction, or that it was even just that it was okay to step out and explore without having to be so didactic about it, you know? So I think sometimes the theoretical is the most important first step. You know, what do I theoretically want to be when I grow up? What do I theoretically want to do for a career? What do I theoretically want to explore in college? Go poke around on campus and see, you know, go talk to somebody like Richard and kind of listen, and he might just blow your mind if you let it in. And you know, when you hear something that is, what the heck did he just say? That might be the most important thing to figure out what he just said. Instead of judging it and saying, oh, he's a crazy old professor. That might be the most important thing you will ever hear once you understand it. What if all of us had turned Bucky off the first time we didn't understand what he was saying? That would have been the very first time I encountered him, by the way, because it's years before I understood anything that man was saying. And yet look where we are, and look at the richness, and look at the depth, and look at the value that we've all gotten from Bucky. Susan, you talked about information, and that's really central to our conversation today, I think, when we talk about what is the theoretical and how does it relate and where do we start, and is that really where it starts? We talk about the field of infinite possibilities, you know, the quantum field, the ZPF, there are lots of names for it. And that is pure possibility. That is only theoretical. And yet it holds all of the promise for everything that ever will be. And it, in fact, according to Lefert, and we'll get into this as we go on, informs. The light itself carries intelligence. The light is packets of information, and it carries that intelligence into the temporal world and structures things. Susan spoke of structure, structures things in specific ways to create what we experience as temporal reality. And that's just such a beautiful thing to me, as I've been able to see beyond sight and to get a glimpse of that through my mind. It's just such a beautiful dance of that energy as it jitterbugs in and out of what we think of as physical reality. I really am amused, Richard, that the students were uncomfortable, but I'm especially gratified that some of them came back and said, oh, wow, I got it. Now, that's pretty cool. You know, I understand that. Way to go, man. Way to go. Just hanging in there and nudging it at them. You can't force it on them, of course. And that's really a great story. Joe, you said something about an artificial boundary. I'm having all kinds of issues with boundaries, particularly the boundaries that we set between each other in the world politically. I have issues that we kill each other over boundaries. I have issues that we put up fences on our border lines and say, you're not welcome. You know, we white people came to this continent and took it away from the red people. Isn't that interesting? Red and white and black and brown and yellow, and it's just so crazy. And now we think it's ours and we can protect it from others. How psychotic is that?
Right.
And how hypocritical is it? And I agree, we don't just want to let every criminal come into any one of our countries and cause trouble. But at the same time, we get to honor and embrace each other. And I think these boundaries are becoming more and more problematic. I suspect that those boundaries that truly are artificial will eventually be discovered as such, and that they will collapse. I think they're collapsing already. I think this mad grasp that I see in politics, take Trump, for example. I mean, I somewhat know this man. I wrote a book with him. Never did meet him, but you know, I was around his family, and we were connected through Kiyosaki, and knew a lot about him and read all of his books. His Make America Great Again and our country and borders and walls, and it's a disturbing conversation to me. There's got to be a higher level conversation that we can have around those issues. I agree that we need protection against elements that would be destructive and have ill will toward us. But can't we talk about the third possibility? Does it always have to be either or? Can we get a little theoretical with each other for a minute and say, hey, all of you folks in South America or wherever you are that would like to come to the US, let's talk about some agreements upon which that could work. Let's talk about some rules by which you could come to whatever country you want to and live there and contribute. I met a Nigerian man yesterday. I'm here partly to rehab my father-in-law's mobile home that he will never live in alone again. He can't live alone. And so we're getting it ready to sell. And this Nigerian man came over because he sells mobile homes. And what he really wanted to do was buy it from me. And he wanted to buy it really cheap, because he wants to make some money on it. So we had an interesting conversation because I've been doing that for 40 years. And it was a bit of a dance, well, how much do you want for it? What do you think? So I don't have any clue. I just got in town. I don't know what it's worth. I don't know what it'll cost me. And you're in the business. Why don't you give me a number? And we're back and forth, And he finally spit out a number and I didn't like it. But isn't that interesting? And so I told him as we were leaving, I said, I want you to know that I really respect immigrants who come to our country, who work. So here you are engaged in the entrepreneurial process. You're not just working a job, you're doing things. You're taking old homes and remodeling them and revitalizing and putting them back into the economy. And good for you, good for you. And I baited him a little bit with, I don't think we should close our borders. If we closed our borders, you wouldn't be here. And to his credit, he said, yeah, but we don't want a bunch of criminals coming either. And, he was already on the other side of it, protecting what is now his homeland, which I appreciated. So boundaries, informing, letting light and theory inform us to the point that we can look at the third alternative. We can come to a win-win. We can do those things and do them successfully. And thank you so much for being here. What time is it in your home?
It's actually not that late. I'm normally, I actually have another meeting shortly,
Oh,
also with the US.
I
So
thought it was 9 or 10 o'clock there, no?
no, it's about 11 p.m.
Well, that's late.
Well, that's not, yeah, I was about to say, that's
You have
certainly
another
not.
Yeah.
meeting after 11 p.m. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
right.
but I mean, all of you are here at very odd times, and it's really early for some of you as well. So, this is I'm just glad to
Well,
be here.
That's very humble of you to deflect my compliment that way, but
Thank you.
Right.
and
Thank you,
go
thank
ahead
you.
and do it, but don't do it without feeling the gratitude and the acknowledgement that
Please
we,
take care, Anne.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Will do.
definitely.
Thank you, you guys.
we know there's a certain
I'll
amount.
just 1 second. I was reminding something that is very relevant to our discussion today that Kelly usually say. He say, once you put a boundary, there's space defined.
Right.
If there's space defined, energy flows in and out, then for us, the other side of it is that we have to define systems and processes.
Yeah.
So the debate
Cool.
in the US, is people tend to polarize things in terms of, there's a boundary. You cannot say definitely there shouldn't be a boundary because the boundary is necessary for a structure.
Right.
What are now the systems and processes that you put in place for that to be effective, given what you want to achieve? And that
Yep,
to me is the
agree.
issue. People spend time waging wars on systems or on processes
Right.
without putting the two together or the absence of one of those. And that is the whole that creates boundary space. Boundary space is US. Systems, what are the rules? What is the legislations, the thing that you are in place to manage the boundary? Processes, how do you go about it?
Yeah.
That should define
Absolutely.
an outcome
And
that is
isn't it
satisfactory
interesting?
to the yes, that is
Isn't it-
satisfactory to you.
Excuse me.
Because I want to visit the US, right? I want to come in, but I don't want to be looked upon as a criminal because I come and go for
Because
a
you're not.
purpose. I'm not looking to stay in the US. I had many opportunities to stay in and being a US citizen that I didn't take.
Yeah.
You get what I'm trying to say? But we are humans and we collaborate, we exchange. See, Richard, we exchange. We always in relation, we always moving. This world is moving. How do we manage that? That is, we have to find a paradigm that works. Until it doesn't work anymore, we change it. As Joe will say, optimize and change.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
Well, I found it interesting today that as we talked about all this, in my experience, Joe had more to say than he usually does, and I loved it.
Yeah,
because
and Joe has a passion that you cannot imagine.
oh,
if you
I
meet Joe.
get it.
You wouldn't imagine here.
He is Italian after all.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
true. And I keep the camera in a way so you can't see my hands moving all the time. No.
Yeah, but they're there. They're going. But what
Exactly.
I wanted to say was that Joe, his training is in systems and processes, and I saw that come out today, and I saw it contribute richly to the conversation. He continued, and he allowed himself today, in my experience, to go there heavily, and it was important to me, and I would imagine to everybody. So, good job, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
And-
He is the torchbearer of this meeting. Remember, the youngest. All right.
Which
So the
means I
legacy,
benefit
the
the
legacy
most.
is on you, Joe. Yeah.
But I benefit the most. I benefit the most from the wisdom that Wayne is, imparting on his son by asking him why. And that's what everybody here has given me. So yeah, it's I feel a lot of gratitude, put it that way. A lot of
It's
gratitude
in our
by being here
youngsters, as always.
so to be here. From kind of listen to everyone and it's a real gift. And there's no other way to put it. So
Just a second, guys. Somebody's at the door.
but no, I think that this is, and I very much appreciate what you just shared. Actually, Manu, is what are we actually trying to optimize instead of focusing on processes? So
All right, Joe, thank you for leading the call. Good job. The tech worked really well, and we'll see you all next week. And
Yep.
Enjoy your meeting.
Thank you.
Stop working
Thanks.
night shifts. You're past that point.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
take care.
guys. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.